but you have new poets in there as well, up and coming poets. So that was important to you as well to reflect that.
Extremely important to have. I think it's about 9 or 10 living poets, and amongst them, of course, this is perhaps not obvious to the outside world, 4 of them are women. I say that because there were no women at Trinity until 40 years ago, and of the living poets, almost half of them are women poets, and that's something that's, for many of us, very important to celebrate the diversity of the college now.
When you strip away all the modern references, cars and air travel and mobile phones and all the rest of it, and we're just left to nature, if you like, how has the poetry changed, if at all?
Well, I think you'll find that a lot of the poetry here is informed by history. You say nature, and that's a natural thing for people to think about poets, and there are many poems in here that are about gardens and trees and the beauty of Cambridge, certainly a Cambridge college such as this. But it's also really interesting, actually, working on this volume, how involved with history many of these poets were. In the 17th century, the politics and religion were hugely important, impossible to avoid, really. And many of the poets write very directly about that, great poets like George Herbert and Andrew Marvell. And this continues to be true right through the 20th century. For example, 2 of our most exotic figures are Vladimir Nabokov, the great Russian émigré writer who came to study here, fleeing basically from the Russian Revolution, and Muhammad Iqbal, then from India, in due course to become the spiritual father of Pakistan, as he's known. And that just gives you a flavour of the way in which great historical events and movements can bring people literally here, and that gets into their writing. So all this is as much to do with the changing faces of history and the way in which poets engage with it as it is about the sky and the trees and the can and so on.
Yeah. So it's important then, from your point of view, for poets to be observers of history in the making, to talk about life as it happens in front of them, as they see it at that time.
I think it's a two-way thing, that on the one hand you see poets, as I've been describing them, very involved in history and writing about it, but you also have a very strong movement of wanting to escape or find refuge perhaps from terrible historical catastrophe and vicissitude, like Nabokov, for example. So it's a kind of two-way thing, that we do have lots of poets here who are very private and write about privacy and withdrawal from the world, or the attempt to do so, and we also have the other sort who are very directly involved with contemporary events.
Is there any money to be made out of poetry?
I don't think so, really, no.
No.
Sorry, I'm looking at Rebecca, whom you're going to talk to.
Are poets always destined to be impoverished to a degree, and in a way, does that help their writing? Because if they were more than comfortable, they may not be so inspired.
It's a really interesting and important issue, this. Quite a significant number of the poets in this volume did other things as well. Francis Bacon is more famous for, and indeed James Clerk Maxwell more famous for other things they did than write poetry. The founder of the Bank of England is in here, for example. So many of them are not dependent on their poetry. But having said that, I think it is something that struck us as we were working on this, how frequently money, usually the lack of it, features in the lives of these and thinking of these writers. In some ways, particularly in the earliest centuries, in the 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, when perhaps life was more precarious. Not that it isn't precarious now, but there are perhaps a few more niches in which poets can find refuge.
Valentine cards, that kind of thing.
Yes.
I mean, that brings us on to commissioning,
Yes.
doesn't it? You know, how you stand on poets being commissioned to write, whether it's wedding day verse or
the poet laureate, like Coran Duffy, yes.
Or for commercial TV commercials and things like that. The Nationwide ad
Yes.
was a commissioned poet who wrote their latest one.
Yes.
Which compromises them a little bit, would you say?
I wouldn't be censorious in any way about that, any more than about actors, say, who have to do commercials to get the money to sponsor their, quote, more serious work, doing Shakespeare and other things that don't pay. So I think it's prima facie a little unlikely that a Valentine card would end up as a great work of art. But it's a spectrum, this, isn't it? I wouldn't blame anybody from trying to make a little money to support their most serious activity.
You must be very proud of this, that you've managed to bring it all together.
Not as I've been saying, not single-handedly. I mean, with the help of a lot, which has been part of the fun. It's been a lot of fun and very educative. But we are proud of it, and the feedback we're beginning to get particularly from former students of the college, is very positive. So they might turn out to be a bestseller yet. I'm told this is unlikely by my colleagues, but we live in hope.